broken promises. To explain why, let's bring into the conversation our Nation to Nation host, Brett Forrester from Ottawa. Thanks for joining us, Brett. You know, this comes on the heels of a report, I think, a year or two ago, talking about, Code Red for humanity, needing to take climate action. This latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report has a lot of harsh words in it. What can you tell us about the significance of this latest report?
Well, exactly. This is the latest report in a series, and the first one called this a Code Red for Humanity, and this is just another one where the language is being ratcheted up. So the IPCC is a global consortium of about 195 scientists from countries across the world, and they delivered this report with the bottom line up front. It's now or never, they said when they issued this report. The group says it is possible to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, which is what was agreed to during the Paris Climate Summit of 2015. But it's going to require immediate and drastic climate emissions reductions across the board. So in introducing this report, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres had this to say, quote, "It is a file of shame, cataloging the empty pledges that put us firmly on track towards an unlivable world. We are on fast track to a climate disaster." So some strong words and a stark warning from the head of the international body there.
And yet more harsh words. They just keep adding them on to the next report year after year, and nothing seems to be getting done here. So I guess, what are they saying has to happen? Again, they've been saying for years what has to happen, but it's not happening. What this time do we have to do, right?
Right. Well, it's not all doom and gloom. There is some hope. What the scientists actually looked at were global mitigation strategies that are being implemented across the board in order to kind of curb the worst impacts of the crisis. And so what they concluded is that there is strong evidence to indicate that our current global climate emission strategies are working a little bit. Global greenhouse gas emissions are currently at the highest point in human history, but since the advent of climate policies, they've been starting to go down. So it's not the hope is not all lost, but the message they're giving is that if we don't act now, and if world leaders don't act with some urgency to implement these policies, then the targets are going to be out of reach.
I know, too, it had mentioned, it's not a lack of technology or money to do these things, it's a lack of political will. I'm curious, was there any mention of Indigenous people? How do we factor in? Does the report mention us at all?
Absolutely. It does mention Indigenous people. Now, I do have to admit the full report weighs in at about 3,000 pages, so I haven't read it all, but there is a 63-page summary for policymakers, and this is intended kind of as a strategic blueprint, and it basically boils down the findings into a way that's easy to understand. And this short summary mentions Indigenous people about a dozen times, and what it essentially says, or one of its key findings, is that including Indigenous people in your climate governance framework is good public policy. And so we know that in Canada, resource extraction is a controversial subject, especially when it takes place on Indigenous territory. This is a finding from a group of world-leading scientists saying that it is good public policy to give Indigenous people a seat at the table. It is backed by empirical evidence. And so, as you mentioned there, the UN chief was pretty critical of countries who say one thing and do another, who pay lip service to the climate crisis and then don't actually implement the best practices. And that's something Canada has been occasionally accused of when it comes to reconciliation. So this is just yet another indication that when Indigenous people demand a seat at the table, there is good reason to listen.
Brett, it's always fascinating to talk to you. We love having you on here. Thank you so much for this, helping put it all in shape.
Thank you.